This video is about pain. It's a very important topic. Lots of lives all around the world are ruined by pain. About a fifth of the population of the world is in significant chronic pain. It can ruin lives. And in a country like Britain, it's more like a third of people have significant chronic pain. And in some developed nations, it may be as much even as a half of all people have significant chronic pain, which they would rather, frankly, feel an awful lot less of. So it's an important topic. And there have been huge leaps and bounds in science. Our knowledge of pain has come a heck of a long way in the last 15 years or so. About 2010, Oxford University started doing a lot of research into pain, and a lot of the studies I've been reading are dated to 2020 and even 2022 and so forth. So this is recent stuff, and one of the reasons that we have learned so much about pain is the advance in scanning, particularly what's known as fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging. It's not that it's a new invention exactly, it's been around for a while, but it's become easier and easier for researchers, scientific researchers, to get their hands on this kit and start doing experiments rather than it's just being used for a very important diagnosis in key hospitals. And with fMRI, you can actually see an image in what they call real time, an animated picture of various parts of the brain lighting up. It's generally to do with blood flow. So if a certain part of the brain is being used, it will demand blood. Oh, send me blood, I'm doing something here. And so when you see which parts of the brain are in this instant demanding blood, and then in that instant not demanding blood, you can see very precisely what the brain's doing and how it's reacting to a test that you're giving the patient who's in the scanner. So I now want you, let's do a thought experiment. I want you to imagine you are standing in the middle of a large, flat, grassy field. It's a lovely day. The birds are singing. There's hardly a cloud in the sky and not a breath of wind. And you're completely alone. And a notion comes upon you. You just decide to yourself, I'm going to run as fast as I can. So you do. You set off running. But actually, it's quite difficult to run as fast as you can when there's no one with an axe chasing you. So you realise after a bit, I can go faster than this. So you use a bit more willpower to run as fast as you can. And you think, I can still squeeze a bit more. And you try harder to run as fast as you can. And then after a bit, you think, okay, this is it. This is a fast. This is maximum speed I'm going to manage today under these conditions. Another notion. I'm going to jump forward. I'm going to dive forwards, arms out in front of me, and just crash into the ground. Yeah, I'm going to do this. And so you dive forward with all your might. And as you're in the air, you're likely to be thinking to yourself something along the lines of, this is likely to hurt. And then crash, you hit the ground. So this is your full body weight straight into the hard ground at top speed. This is about as much as you can hurt yourself. And crash, sure enough, your arms perhaps hit the ground first and they skid along the ground a little bit. You get grazes on your forearm and your elbow, the point of your elbow probably takes a bit of impact, and then eventually some part of your rib cage takes most of your weight at full speed, and then your legs slam into the ground, perhaps some of your toes kick, end on, and you've bashed your knee, of course, and and you lie there. Ow, okay. And then you get up and dust yourself off, and your belt caught the ground and sort of got pulled down, and your belly was, you've got a graze on you, never mind, it wasn't your favourite shirt anyway. You're likely to be thinking at this point, well, I'm not going to do that again. Now, second experiment. Let's imagine the weather conditions are the same. You are the same person. And the field is the same, except now you are not alone. You are in fact most of the way through a game of rugby. Your team is in the lead, but there are only a few points in it, and the opposition team is very close to scoring a try. So you realise you've got to stop them. And just at this point, a pass comes straight across your front to their number 12, and he's actually pretty quick, and he manages to dash past you. It's up to you. You're the nearest guy. You're going to have to stop him. Because he has to jink a bit, that gives you a chance, because even though he's a faster runner than you, maybe because he has to jink around to avoid the other players, this will give you just that enough advantage to catch him. So you run after him as fast. This time you are actually running as fast as you possibly can. He is fast. He is really fast, this guy. But he's starting to get away from you. But maybe if you dive with all your might, you can fly through the air and catch him. So you dive, because otherwise he'll score a try. And he's a 16-stone guy running as fast as he can. So you grab him round those big, muscular, flailing legs, and the studs from one of his boots catches you whack on the shin. But never mind, you've got to get him, and you twist slightly as he tries to get out of the tackle. But never mind, you bring him down anyway, but now not at the angle you would have chosen. And bang, you crash into the ground on the point of your shoulder. Crash, and you have the weight of a 16-stone man on top of you. But would you believe it? He passed the ball off to their number 7, and you have to get up to your feet because now there's another guy who might score a try, and he goes the other way, but you run after him and you do a second tackle and you bring him down. And okay, temporary stop in play. Various people pat you on the back. That was a good tackle, by the way. Okay, you save the day for the moment, but you're still in danger. You look at your captain. He's giving out instructions. He wants you to cover a gap to the right with the number 4. You look to the number 4. You and the number 4. Yeah, we understand what our job is. You exchange nods. Okay, right. Remember that tackle? Not the last tackle, but the tackle before that? You've forgotten it already, haven't you? How much pain did you experience from that tackle? Remember the first one? You crashed onto the point of your shoulder. Well, presumably the amount of impact that your body experienced was greater than when you were on your own, running not quite as fast, and you weren't actually tackling a person, you were just diving onto the ground. And yet, you're pretty much unaware of the pain of that tackle. And when you get undressed for bed in the evening and you look down and you see this angry red mark on your leg where that stud hit you, what you're likely to think to yourself is, I don't remember doing that. So pain isn't what René Descartes said it was. René Descartes is a 17th century French philosopher, famous for I think, therefore I am. He agreed with Galen, the Greek 2nd century doctor, that it was the brain that felt pain rather than some other part of the body. A lot of people thought it was the heart, for instance. But those two men both decided, no, everything is the brain. And today we are in accord with the pair of them. Yeah, it's the brain, not the heart, that really feels pain. But his model was a very simple one. If your toe goes in the fire, some sensors in your toe detect the damage, send a message somehow up to the brain where a bell rings in the form of pain. There you go. It's a simple system. But it's not, is it? He was wrong, because when that rugby player landed on the point of his shoulder, he should have been in far more pain than when you just ran and just dived onto the ground and ow, hit the ground thinking, what did I do that for? That was really silly. Ow, I've bashed my elbow. Oh, I've got a graze here. Ow. But the rugby player accepts, oh yeah, you get loads of bumps and scrapes playing rugby, but in the end you're generally fine, so you carry on for another game another time. Now think of another situation. You're at a party and there are loads of, it's a children's party, there are loads of kids there, 3, 4, 5, that sort of age, and they're all running around having a wonderful time, making that incredibly loud, excited screech that they do, which actually it really hurts my ears. But they're having a great time. There's musical statues, there's jellies and creams, and there's one of the little boys who's running around giggling his little head off until one of the adults sees a red mark on the back of his leg. He's wearing shorts, and go, ooh, what's that? Stephen, come over here a bit. And then other adults go, ooh, what? And they find he's been stung or bitten by some insect or whatever, but he hadn't noticed, and he was running around having a wonderful time. That's what he was concentrating on, all the fun and the jellies and creams. But then the boy, seeing the worried looks on all the adults' faces and realizing that they're paying a lot of attention, and he looks at the back of his, and he sees this red mark, and he doesn't know what it is, and he's off, and he's inconsolable now until he's given some sweets that the other kids don't get. All because some idiot went, oh, Stephen, let me have a look at that. If that adult had said nothing, he'd have been fine, probably. So we've all experienced that too, haven't we? Pain doesn't actually map very well onto injury at all. Perhaps before I go much further, I should say that I'm not a medically trained doctor. I'm not either a specialist researcher in this field. I'm just someone who's been interested in this for a long time and has read a few books on it. And notably, lately I read Monty Lyman's The Painful Truth, which I rather liked. But I do have some, if you like, skin in the game, because I have for much of my life been unfortunately, in chronic pain. I was 21, I think, when I went to see the band You Slosh play at my university. I'd seen them before. I knew they were a really good, high energy, really dancey band, folk rock mix. And I told a load of my friends, oh, you should go and see this band. They're really good. And they came along. And there I was near the front, dancing away, busting my moves. Oh, yeah, I was dancing, really, dancing. And perhaps motivated by jealousy, my friends to my left decided that they wanted to do some dancing as well to this diddly 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 music. Only they were lads, and they didn't have quite my dance refined skill, you understand. And so they started doing the lads dance. One of the lads would throw his arm over his mate ear and then throw his arm over, and then all three of them would go, hey, doing the lads dance. See? Right. And then there were three, and then another arm was thrown, and then there were four in the chain, and then five, and then six, and then seven. Seven was immediately to my left. Now, I better not name him because it wouldn't be fair. But he was a really nice guy. Everybody liked this guy. He and I are still friends, by the way. But unfortunately, he was about this tall and built like a barrel, and had possibly more beers in him that was entirely wise. And he decided that I should be number 8. So he reached up and tried to bring me into the ladies line for the dance. And I rather deftly took his hand and danced out of his clutches, and I think by this method made it super abundantly clear that I didn't want to do the ladies dance because I was doing my moves. You don't want to stifle a man doing moves like I was doing. But the message, it seems, wasn't clear enough, and after a while he grabbed me again, and I really forcefully took him off, and I shouted "No!" into his ear, thus making it more than super abundantly clear that I really didn't want to join the lads dance. But he gave it another go, and oh my goodness, right, and I'm not proud of this, but I actually punched him. Not to injure him, you understand. He was built like a barrel. The punch just bounced off him anyway. But it was just to make really amazingly crystal clear, more clear than you would think it was ever possible or necessary to express anything, that I did not want to join the lads dance. And then knowing surely now that the message was across well and clearly, I got back to my dancing, and then just as I was in the mid-move, he decided that the way to get me to join would be to jump as high as he could, and then hook an arm right round my neck, and then come down on me, boom, full body weight. Built, as I say, like a barrel. Anyway, there was a horrible and that was the end of my dancing for that. I tried to carry on dancing, but I was in way too much pain, and I've been in constant pain ever since that day. I have good times and bad times. In good times, it's not too bad. Most of the time I'm not particularly aware of it, and I can get on with most activities, but occasionally it gets very bad. And a couple of years ago, I had to, for the very first time in my life, call an ambulance because I woke up in the morning and I just couldn't move. Or rather, I could move, but any tiny move in any direction was absolute agony. I was making quite a bit of noise. I was mildly surprised that my neighbours didn't call round out of concern, but they didn't. Maybe they weren't in. Anyway, I thought I'm going to have to. Immediately, I realised I'm going to have to ring for an ambulance. Unfortunately, my phone was 1 yard away from me. That's 3 feet. That's less than a metre. It took me an hour to reach that phone. So that was pretty bad. So there you go. There's my skin in the game. But don't worry. I mean, I can still jump around. I can still wear armour. I can still dance most of the time. I have bad days. So that's one of the reasons that I ended up reading this, and I found that reading this was far more useful in my partial recovery from the pain I was in than any of the drugs or treatment that I was offered by the National Health Service. I was given loads of painkillers, including some painkillers that were far, far stronger than the ones you can get over the counter, and none of them had any effect at all, completely useless. I took a few of them, just this is pointless, they do nothing. Anyway, so that's my skin in the game, if you like. The first major point I'm going to make is about the function of pain. because pain is really useful, and we know this. There was someone who was researching pain, and he found himself in Pakistan, and he got to hear of a child, a 13-year-old boy called Navid, who lived in a fairly remote mountain village somewhere, who was becoming quite a local celebrity because it seems that he had somehow conquered pain. He had mind over matter. This boy could surmount pain and withstand all sorts of horrendous injuries, and he was doing shows for the locals, and the researcher thought, I must interview this boy, who was at the time 13. Shortly after his 14th birthday, Navid decided to up his game a bit. You see, the thing is that, yeah, he'd been stabbing himself and cutting himself and burning himself and walking across broken glass and hot coals and, things like that. And he wowed the audiences. But if you live in a fairly remote place, then a lot of the people you're performing to are the same people every time. So you've got to keep upping your game to impress them. And he decided jumping off a really high building onto some hard ground, oh yeah, that was what was going to wow the audience. So this he did. And he jumped and he landed and the people were amazed, and he got up, dusted himself down, and with a smile, ta-da! And he walked a few steps away, collapsed and died. Yep, there was hardly a mark on him externally, but internal bleeding was horrendous. So he died, and the researcher didn't get to talk to him or study him when he was alive, but did turn up and interview other members of the family, because he wasn't unique. There were lots of members of his family and a few members of a couple of related families in that area of Pakistan who all had the same strange genetic quirk, which meant that they felt no pain at all. None of those people made it to the age of 20. They all died young. But you might at least think, well, but they were happy, right? Were they? Well, they were presumably cheery because they never felt any pain. No, people interviewed by the researcher who said, oh yes, I remember Navid, and no, he was actually generally quite downcast. I mean, yeah, he was a bit of a showman when he was doing his shows, but if you knew him in real life, no, he was actually quite downcast and paranoid. Every time he was walking along and he would just knock his foot or something, he would stop and he would check his foot. Am I injured? Am I injured? There's a hole in his clothes. There's a hole. Am I injured? And he would take the shirt off. Am I fine? Am I fine? Can you see anything? He was paranoid about injuries because he knew, because he wasn't a complete idiot, that if he didn't pay attention, he could end up going the way of his relatives. Now, it was a British doctor called Dr. Paul Brand who in 1942 went out to India and overturned millennia of misunderstandings about leprosy. It was always thought that leprosy caused your extremities, your fingertips, the end of your nose, your ears, your toes and so forth, to shrivel up and wither and drop off. And this is actually not true. What leprosy does directly is cause numbness. So there you are, you're doing the washing up, you reach under the bubbles in the soapy water for that sharp knife, and oh, there it is, you find it. You can feel what angle it is in your hand, so you turn it to a safe angle, you pick it up, you wash it up, you carry on. Later, you start developing leprosy and start losing the sensitivity in your fingertips, and you don't pick it up at the right angle, and you cut yourself, but you don't notice, and you carry on washing up, and you cut yourself again. And then later, oh, there's red in the water, what's going on? Hang on. Oh, I've cut myself. There's two cuts. Now it's like an X. There are flaps of skin that aren't going to heal very well. Never mind. It still doesn't hurt that much. So you push on. And, it seems to be all right. Well, you nearly finished the washing up. So you carry on. And then you pick up a thing that's a bit dirty and some dirt goes into that wound. You get an infection and ... down the line, you end up losing this fingertip. And then, because that was your main fingertip, you then start using this one more, which means after a while that one goes the same way, and then this one, and then this one, and you start losing all your extremities. So leprosy causes numbness, doesn't cause the shriveling. But indirectly, because these people are not feeling the pain that ordinarily they would feel, and you might say should feel, they don't get protected. They don't get the warnings that pain. If you were in too much pain of a fingertip to use that finger at all, you would make sure you get it dressed, and you wouldn't use it. You'd keep it curled in, and you'd be using all the other fingers until this one healed properly. But without that, you carry on using this finger, which doesn't hurt. And yeah, even lepers who know their condition and know that they've got to be careful can still end up losing their fingertips. Now, another thing that's important to understand about pain is that Modern science has shown that all kinds of pain are sort of the same. We don't think of them as the same, largely because we use different language to describe them. But actually, when you stick someone in an fMRI scanner and look at which part of the brain are demanding blood, you find that exactly the same parts of the brain light up when someone is, say, jabbed in the hand with a pin, ow, physical pain, damage pain, as when you get them to describe the heartache of losing their spouse. Emotional pain, social pain, the pain of loneliness, isolation, being left out, all these emotional pains are actually pain. When you lose your lover and you feel it feels like physical pain. It is. Your brain is experiencing the same response as physical pain. And another way we know this is that the same chemicals, when put into your brain to alleviate those feelings, they work on all the types of pain. And your brain uses something called endogenous opiates. Opiates, they're a range of a family of chemicals, if you like, including opium, which is heroin, sort of. They act in the brain as painkillers, and the brain uses endogenous, meaning generated naturally from within the body, endogenous opiates as painkillers in the brain. But there are other chemicals that the researchers can use, opiate blockers, and so you can block the ability of your body to itself block pain, and these people then start experiencing the pain again. So you can show, oh yeah, it's opiates at work, because if you block the opiates, then you can't make the pain go away by any means. Anyway, so they've done experiments to get someone in an MRI scanner, fMRI scanner, and you, for instance, then you get them to play the ball game. You have a ball, you throw it to that person, who throws it to that person, who throws it to that person, throws it to that person, throws it to you, throws it, that it's just, like beach ball or whatever on the beach. So you're playing this game, but actually the other people throwing the ball, but they're in on it. They're stooges, and you throw the ball to that person, who throws it to that one, who throws it to that one, 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 and no one's throwing the ball back to you. But and the researchers looking at the brain in the scanner go, oh, look, they're feeling pain. It's social being left out of the gang pain. But look, all the bits of the brain that normally light up with pain, they're all lighting up. And if we give them slightly some opiates, and oh, now they feel all right again. They don't care that they're being left out. All pain's sort of the same. They've done experiments on squirrel monkeys, and they've done actually an awful lot of experiments, but one experiment that I just think of right now is about squirrel monkeys, and they gave squirrel monkeys babies treatment such that they wouldn't cry out when their mother was absent. And they didn't. The mother would wander off, and they wouldn't go, wah, wah, Mom, where are you? They would just carry on doobie-doo, and so the mother would just wander off quite contentedly. It really helps to feel abandonment, so you then cry, and then you get your mum back, which of course in the wild would be a major boost to your survival chances. So emotional pain is really important. These babies have to feel pain to make them cry, and what modern science tells us is that these squirrel monkeys were feeling pain a bit like they'd been jabbed with a pin or whatever. Empathic pain is also very, very important. So I can remember I was in the cinema watching Blade Runner. Oh, this is many years ago. And there's that bit where Deckard runs along one roof and jumps, trying to make it to the next roof. And there's a sort of girder sticking out of the other roof, and he lands on it. And half the people in the audience went, oh, that looked like that really hurt. And those people, if they'd been in MRI scanners, they would have been feeling not as much pain as Deckard would have felt on landing on the end of a girder, of course, but some degree of actual pain on witnessing someone else feel pain. It's a normal human reaction if you're not a sociopath. And you can, for instance, show a 7-year-old a video of someone hitting their thumb with a hammer and going, whoa, whoa, like that. And the 7-year-old, a normal 7-year-old, will move his thumb and perhaps make a motion to guard it and look a little bit anxious. So empathic pain is something that exists. And I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to stop now because the telephone has just gone. And now I'm back. It was my brother. He's got a little bit further with his game design. Now, so a normal 7-year-old feels empathic pain, but younger children don't, which explains why small children can be very, very cruel. A parent stubs his toe in front of his small child, and rather than getting the sympathy, which frankly he feels he deserves from his small child, the child just bursts out laughing at him. Oh, the cruelty of my child. Well, they don't feel empathic pain. And empathic pain is a great teacher. Empathic pain, of course, there's the pain of being whacked on the thumb, but there are other forms of pain. So social and emotional empathic pain takes a little bit longer to develop, and empathic pain for others in a social sense takes most children until their early teens maybe to get good at, and then later on they get better at it so that they can actually feel empathic pain not just for people that they know immediately around them, but also for knowledge of strange abstract things, like you read a newspaper article about some people who are suffering a long way away. You've never met these people, but then you start, oh, that's really terrible. You start feeling that. And of course, teenagers, being what teenagers are, they will start feeling this first twinge of empathic pain for people they don't even know, and they'll think, oh, I'm so sensitive. I've discovered I have empathy for these people far away and nobody else feels it. It's only me. Yeah, well, that's... No, actually, it's not just you. It's just you for the first time. It's new to you, but it's not new for the rest of us. You're a teenager, and don't worry, you will eventually grow up. Anyway, empathic pain is a really good teacher, and it's a very efficient teacher, because if you see someone else put his hand in the fire and burn himself and get really horribly scorched, and you, oh, ow, oh, that looks really bad, and you look at the scorch marks on him afterwards, ooh, you don't have to put your hand into the fire to learn through pain the same lesson. You were taught by pain. You felt actual pain, so you learn your lesson better by having empathy with someone else suffering, so that you don't have to actually suffer that directly yourself. So in a social pack-living animal like a human, empathic pain is a really good group teacher. Incidentally, if you are the parent of a child and you think, I've got a horrible feeling I am the parent of a sociopath, there's a test. You can actually put your suspect teenager into an fMRI scanner and start showing him pictures of himself but with limbs missing, and telling him stories about horrible things happening to him, and then seeing how he's reacting, and pain perhaps will be the response in his head. And then you tell him stories about things happening to other people, and you show them horrible pictures of injuries of other people, and nothing. Yep, you're a parent to a sociopath. But eventually they learn to fake a degree of empathic pain. But they don't learn as well as the rest of us these things. Now, pain can also be positive, though. There was a study done in Oxford, I think this was about 2010, when they looked at rowers. Very easy place to study rowers. And those swinging together in a coxed 8, for instance, could endure twice the amount of pain from the rowing itself, the effort, that those rowing alone could. There is a communal fellowship of suffering that enables people to push themselves a little bit further, it seems. So pain can sort of offer you a reward, and this would explain why we do weird stuff. I mean, people will eat chili peppers. They will go running. They'll run marathons. They'll read 50 Shades of Grey. People, it seems, are absolutely gluttons for punishment sometimes. So why do people actually seek pain? Well, it's often said that we seek pleasure and avoid pain. Actually, though that's not completely untrue, perhaps it's more true to say that we try to avoid punishment and we seek rewards. So someone might choose to run a marathon. He's done the wet stage, he's done the swimming. They always put that first because if you get exhausted, you don't want to drown. Then there's the second stage, which is the cycling. You don't want to crash at high speed. But now you're really exhausted after those, and you're on the running stage. So if you run out of steam at this point, you'll just come to a halt and sit down. It's much safer to do that last. But most of the way through the running stage, you are in so much pain. Your brain asks the various bits of you, how are we doing down there? And all the reports will be, there's lactic acid everywhere. We're in so much pain. Please, can you not just stop? The muscles in your legs. Okay, joints, how are you doing? There's the knee joint here. Ow, frankly, ow. Could you just not, for the love of goodness itself, mercy, will you stop? And yet, they push themselves on. And one of the reasons they're able to push themselves on is they've done it before. Maybe this is the 5th triathlon you've done, so you know you were able to push through. You felt this bad before, and yet you carried on. You have this idea of that finish line. You've just run past a mile marker. You know there are only 2 miles to go, so your body's filling up with dopamine. Now, dopamine isn't so much a reward chemical as a sort of, it makes you want things. So it's making you want to get to the finish line. You have this idea that you will, when you get there, get such a huge reward. And you're almost tasting that reward now as you run. And you've been here before, so you know that you can go through this pain and still be all right because this is your 5th triathlon. So you keep going in the pursuit of that reward. Your brain is tempting you with this carrot of a reward which is greater than the pain you're going through now, so you will go through it. Now there's a chemical in chili peppers, it's called capsaicin, and it mimics it mimics high temperatures. There are thermal receptors in you, the good old TRVP1s if you really want to know, and these are sensitive to temperatures above about 43 degrees centigrade. So when you're starting to get painfully hot, so these are nociceptors, pain receptors. It was Charles Scott Sherrington who first gave them the name nociceptor. It's from the Latin, literally, I harm. Interestingly, placebo is Latin for I will please. Although in medieval Latin, it actually means something a little bit different. In medieval Latin, it was used for a charlatan or a flatterer, an I will pleaser, a type of person. Anyway, so a nociceptor, so it's receiving the report that there's dangerously high temperature here. You might get burned. Stop it. These receptors are saying, but actually they've been fooled. You've just eaten a chili pepper, but they're fooled well enough that your body will start responding as if you are genuinely hot, and you'll start to sweat from chili peppers, even though the chili peppers are just at room temperature. So your body's being fooled. It sets up. There is a theory as to why chili peppers have evolved this. I don't completely, but here it is. The idea is it's a fruit, right? It's got seeds in it, and mammals will graze, eat the fruit, and then not go very far. And then when it comes out the other end of the mammal, it goes lands on the ground, not very far from where it ate the fruit in the first place. So it's to the evolutionary advantage of the fruit-bearing plant to have its seeds cast further away. So capsaicin is felt by mammals, but not by birds. So a bird, and you notice that a chili pepper is a sort of long, thin, quite easy for a bird to down in one, quite easy for them to swallow. So a bird goes, oh, great bit of fruit that none of the mammals is eating, great, I'll have it, swallows it whole, and then flies a long way away and deposits the seeds further away. That's the current theory. Personally, I think, really? Because they grow in tropical regions, and a lot of tropical birds have really quite small ranges, whereas a large animal is likely to browse this area out and then move on, and they have quite slow digestion. So I would have thought you'd probably get spread maybe even further by a mammal, and then get an awful lot of fertilizer, if it's a large mammal, deposited in an area which is probably not very different from this area, which we know is one in which this fruit can grow. So I would have thought, if anything, mammals would be better at spreading the seeds around. But the thing with a browsing deer or whatever, they're herbivores, and they've got these grinding teeth. And I look at peppers and I notice that they've got quite delicate, soft seeds, which the grinding teeth of a mammal would just mash up and make them completely infertile. So personally, I think that's the reason. But anyway, bit of a sidetrack. So, your body is fooled into thinking, alert, alert, pain, pain. And you give chili peppers to any child from any culture, and that child will not like it. I'm being burned. They'll spit it out. Adult humans have to learn that they're okay. You eat the chili, it's pretty horrendous, but afterwards you're actually fine. So they start training their brains. I'm all right. I'm actually safe. I can eat this and I'm fine. And you can learn to enjoy it. They did experiments, in Oxford again, where they put people in the experiment. They showed them shapes, triangle, okay, circle, octagon, whatever, fine, square. After being shown a square, they'd be given a shock. Ow, pain, ow, what? Okay, right, triangle, fine. Another triangle, okay. Octagon, right, fine. Okay, square. After a while, they got trained. They got so anxious. They saw these squares. They got so anxious seeing the squares that after a while, their anxiety would go through the head, through the roof. And anxiety itself is a form of pain. And if you do feel any actual physical pain when you are very anxious, it hurts more. So it got to the point where people just seeing a square would go, and you haven't even shocked them yet. So you can train a brain to expect harm and be fearful of harm and be anxious. And you can train a brain to actually, don't worry. It's like that rugby player. Yeah, he's played rugby loads of times, and after a bit of rough and tumble, he's generally fine. So he doesn't mind the pain because he's trained his brain to expect to be fine afterwards. There is, if you like, a committee in your head. Let's think of the time, this was 1995, a British builder who was 29 years old was coming down a ladder. And he thought, I'm a young fit man, I won't climb all the way to the bottom, I'll just jump the last bit. So he jumped down and landed on a plank of wood, out of which was sticking, rather unfortunately, a 6-inch nail, which went straight through the bottom of his boot and came out the top of the boot. And he saw that, and he made his... I wasn't actually there, but I imagine that his mates were summoned around him, and they were all thinking, someone's saying, call an ambulance, and he was screaming the place down. So the committee in his head that decides how much pain to give to the consciousness, this man's consciousness, said, okay, visuals, can I report from visuals, please? Hello, this is visuals here. I'm looking down and I'm seeing this huge great nail sticking out the foot. I have never seen this before. It looks really horrendous. I'm voting for an awful lot of pain right now. Thank you. Okay, thank you, visuals. Audio, can we have an audio report? Hello, this is audio. The noise it made when it went through the boot was just, it wasn't very loud, but it was really sort of, So I'm definitely voting for, a huge amount of pain. Okay, thank you. Empathy, can we have a report from empathy? Yes, empathy here. I'm watching the scene around me, and I can see lots of anxious people. There's a man over there who keeps saying, call an ambulance, for goodness sake, call an ambulance. He seems quite anxious, and he's just said, call an ambulance again. I'm looking at the expressions of the people there. They all look very stressed, very scowly. They all look very concerned. I'm going with empathy. I would say yes, a lot of empathic pain. I'm voting for lots of pain right now. So this man was screaming the place down. An ambulance was summoned. Somehow they got him into the back of the ambulance. I imagine they had to cut the plank down to get that in. That must have been pretty difficult. And he was in so much pain. They got him to the hospital. They gave him fentanyl. Fentanyl is 100 times stronger than morphine. Oh yeah, that morphine, when you get a bullet wound during World War II, they give you morphine and that would calm you down. They gave him fentanyl, 100 times stronger than that, and he was still screaming the place down and thrashing about so much they couldn't get the boot off his foot to have a look to see what was going on in there. So they had to sedate him, and eventually he was out. And, okay, right, and they cut away his boot slowly and carefully, and the nail went dink. It had gone between two of his toes, and I imagine possibly at a slight angle. So it came out the top of his boot a little bit further up the foot, making it look as though it was more close to the centre of the foot, as though it had gone straight through, burn out. No, it had missed his foot completely. He was totally uninjured. And yet fentanyl hadn't dulled the pain. So I don't think anyone thought that he was faking. Everyone was convinced that he was in big trouble with a nail through his foot. So he was in real, actual pain. The committee in his head went, whoa, and they all voted to press the extreme pain now button. There was so much evidence to back up the notion that feeling an awful lot of pain right now would be appropriate, that the committee, if you like, overruled the fact that the cells in the foot weren't really reporting all that much damage. But of course, he felt the impact. He'd landed. He felt the nail, perhaps when it went through between his toes. He felt something go whack through his foot, so the feeling was generally pointing towards pain. So even though he was totally uninjured, the committee voted. This shows you just how complicated pain is. It's not just, as Descartes thought, a sensor, a line, rings a bell. There's an awful lot more happening. And this analogy of the committee in the head, I think, is a very useful one, because it enables us to explain so many other things about the way pain behaves, at least in people. But there are a lot of controversies. For example, can babies feel pain? Can they feel pain? I mean, babies aren't conscious. You may say, oh yeah, they are, but well, I wasn't conscious when I was a baby. Can you remember being born? No, nobody can. All right. Mike Oldfield says he can, but he was under hypnosis when he remembered being born. So I don't think that really counts. No, people can't remember being born. What's the point of a baby being conscious? What decisions are a baby likely to make that are going to be better than the ones provided by instinct? None. When a human baby is born, the brain is only about a third of the size of an adult's brain, which is pretty handy because you've got to get through the birth canal of the mother. You don't want to kill your mother being born. That's not good for your survival chances. And what's the point of being born with the part of your brain, for instance, that knows how to walk? A newborn baby human's legs are so weak, it can't walk anyway. It's a completely useless part of the brain to have. So grow that later. A baby deer is born with a full-size brain, and it's born with the bit of the brain that knows how to walk. So we watch them get born. The baby, you've seen the nature program, the newborn. What is a baby deer called? Whatever it is, foal, lamb, whatever it is. It struggles to its feet almost immediately and then goes over and starts suckling at its mother's udder. And wow, it's born knowing how to walk, but it's also born with legs capable of walking. Humans aren't. And humans have got these dangerously big heads that have got to get through the birth canal. So we're born with 1/3 size. A baby deer has a brain the same size as its mother's. Not as its mother, as its mother's brain. Anyway, so it was 1985 that the baby of one Jill Lawson in Britain was being operated on, and she was shocked to discover that her baby was given no anaesthetic. How extraordinary, you might think. But no, how standard, actually, because it was taken in modern, mainstream Western medicine that babies can't feel pain, so there's no point in anaesthetising them during operations. But they were paralysed because otherwise they moved too much, which was very inconvenient when you're trying to use a scalpel. And Jill Lawson complained and started a campaign. And by 1987, so things were moving pretty quickly, only 2 years later, the research had been done and it was accepted as mainstream Western medicine that, actually, it is worth giving babies anaesthetic during operations because experiments showed that the outcomes were better. It seems that the babies experience less distress, less stress, and stress is generally bad for you. And it's not really the case then to say that they definitely feel pain. And we can say with some confidence that they do not feel pain in the way that adults feel pain. Adults are conscious, that's one big difference. Also, if you put a baby in an MRI scanner and look at which parts of the brain are lighting up when it's feeling pain, it's about 80-90% of the same parts as a 90%. It's about 90% of the same parts of the brain light up. It's 18 out of 20, if you want to know, as in an adult. But it's not exactly the same pattern, not to the same degrees, and not all of them. And here's a biggie. Morphine doesn't work on babies. Morphine just doesn't work on babies. So babies are clearly regulating pain differently from adults. So they feel pain differently, but they do sort of feel a version of pain, it seems. Anyway, 1987. That's so recently. That's during my lifetime. So if I had been operated on when I was a baby, I would not have been given anaesthetic. Now, just because you're feeling pain doesn't necessarily mean that pain is beneficial in any way to you. Let's imagine you've evolved in a world where 9 times out of 10, feeling pain under this circumstance is advantageous. Well, 9 times out of 10 is good, so evolution will favour your having that trait because 90% of the time it's advantageous. So on balance, if you're going to be in that situation many times during your life, it's worth feeling the pain. Yeah, 10 times it's just annoying and inconvenient, but 9 times out of 10, great, evolution will play the odds. But also, things can go wrong. There are people who have mutations, just like Navid had a mutation which meant that he didn't feel pain. There are people who feel inappropriate pain. There are in the world about 15 families with a horrible mutation, which means that they feel agonizing pain from the acts of eating and excreting. Can you imagine having to live with that condition? So my next big point that I want to make is that pain is an illusion. It's all in your head, but knowing that it's all in your head doesn't make you magically able to just wish it away, unfortunately, which is probably a good thing because people will then wish away something that's actually telling them something useful. They did experiments in the 1990s where they got this head stimulator. So they put this thing on your head. It was a brain stimulator, and they were going to give you all sorts of tests to see if you could do much better than normal with a brain stimulator. But there was a side effect, people were told. It can cause headaches, particularly if they turn the settings up. And people could see the knobs and dials on the brain stimulator. And sure enough, loads of people said, oh, actually, that's starting to give me a headache. Could you turn it down? Because they could see the knobs being turned up and, the knobs, you've probably guessed, the knobs did nothing. The brain stimulator did nothing. It was just a box you stuck on your head. It had some wires going to it, but there was no electricity going up the wires. It was all a scam. Well, not a scam. It was an experiment. They were being deceived for the sake of science, which is all right. So people can just conjure out of nothing pain. So pain, it's all in your head. When you drop the anvil on your foot, there's no actual pain in your foot. It's all in your head. It might feel as though it's in your foot. No, it's all in your head. But you knew that. Now, an awful lot of what we experience. In fact, you live in virtual reality. The whole of your life is if you touch something with your hand, it feels as though it's there, and all that feeling and the perception of your hand, everything, all of that's all in your head. When you look at this picture, if you've got colour vision, all the colours are just illusions created by your brain. And when you look at a picture, a certain amount of brain activity is required to just take in the information from your eyes just do that really. But that's only about a 1/11th of the task. Now, the next 10/11ths are processing that, sticking in the colour, putting the depth in by matching the two eyes together, detecting edges, removing shash, deciding what's important, working out how something has moved because the picture has changed, and so forth. And one of the things that your brain is doing is making a prediction. Now, if I were to get this cricket ball and throw it really fast and hard, and you were to catch it, oh, well done, by the way, good catch, that would be because you predicted where the ball was going to be, but you did this largely subconsciously. Now, so here I am, I throw the ball, it leaves my hand and gets as far as here. Light then hits it, bounces off and goes into your eye. That happens very quickly, light is very fast. But it does take some time, and in that time, the ball moves from here to here. Okay, then the cells in the retina of your eye have to react. That takes a fair bit longer, and while they're doing that, the ball moves to here. And then they have to send the signals down nerves, up the optic nerve to your brain, and then those signals have to be received by the brain. That takes a lot longer, at which point the ball moves to here. And then the processing, I said the 10/11ths of the processing starts. And that takes a fair bit longer again. Now, so by the time that's all done, the ball is here. It's nearly hit you. So what's useful? Do you want your brain to say, right, we finally processed the report we got as to where the ball was, and it's here. Do you want to show it back here where it's just left my hand? Or would it be more useful for you to say, actually, we're going to show you an illusion of the ball here, because based on what we saw, we're predicting that that's where the ball probably actually is now. So you put your hand to catch not an actual report of a ball, but a prediction by your brain of where the ball probably is now. Yeah, but don't think that the brain just sees a snapshot, this here, and then makes a prediction based on that. It had all the information leading up to it. So you saw me wind up to throw, and you saw the ball leave my hand. That's a lot of information to go on. So actually, your brain is really good, and it predicts that the ball is here. It's actually here. But that's a really good prediction. But then, what if as the ball comes in towards you, it hits something you hadn't noticed? There's a pane of glass there or wire or something, and it pings off sideways. You are going to catch where the ball was predicted to be, so you're seeing an image of the ball apparently here, but then the ball pings off that way. What? So you'll see people move to catch a thing, and then they get really surprised because they were actually moving to catch a prediction of the ball, not actual genuine sensory report of where the ball was. So if then something comes along which contradicts that, suddenly things seem to happen much more fast. And what was that? And your brain will even muck around with your sense of time. It will say, that ball that we saw, you didn't see that. Forget that. And forget the time that we made you perceive of the ball travelling to that point. No, we're actually going to go zip back in time and give you a new report and then put it in your perception of where it should have been in the timeline, and then the ball will flip off that way. But whoa, what? You see people get very surprised if there's a change of situation at the last minute. So you're living in virtual reality. Pain is virtual. The feelings of touch, sight, sense, hearing, all of it, it's all illusion. In fact, your entire body map is an illusion. You may have heard that people who have a limb severed, they get phantom limb pain. So they might get a pain in a hand that you don't actually have because that whole arm has been severed. Well, you could think of it, actually your entire body is a phantom body all the time. Everything's an illusion. It was 1950 something when a Canadian doctor was sticking probes into the brains of patients, and he was working on epilepsy, and he was trying to stimulate the aura sensation. Just before someone has an epileptic fit, there's a sort of ooh moment. I've once heard it said, everything is exactly the right colour, whatever that means. Anyway, he accidentally discovered the body map because one of his patients went, "Oh, doctor, that's my right knee." I can feel that. Oh, that's my right knee, definitely. What are you doing? That's interesting. Okay, I didn't actually mean to stimulate that part of the brain. That was an accident. But while I'm here, what's that? Oh, that's my thigh. Oh, that's my neck. Oh, that's my big toe on my left foot. Oh, that's my sort of here by my ribs and so forth. And he prodded around and came up with the body map of the brain's regions that deal with sensations in various parts of your body. And you may have seen pictures of the usually called the homunculus. If I can find a decent picture of one, I'll put it here. And it's a map of how much of your brain's volume is dedicated to the sensations in these various parts of your body. And you'll see that they don't map exactly with the proportions of reality. So your eyes, your lips, your fingertips, your genitals, things that are very, very sensitive are hugely enlarged because so much of your brain is processing information from those very sensitive parts, and other parts, particularly the skin on your back, greatly reduced in size. But actually this homunculus is wrong in another way, because though this shows the correct proportions, the map in your brain, the physical map in your brain, is completely jumbled up. So your hands are actually right next to your face. and the soles of your feet are right next to your genitals, for example. So in terms of the order in which everything's been put, it's got a different order, though strangely it's consistent from one person to the next. It seems that pretty much everyone has got the map jumbled up in pretty much the same way. And this can explain a number of things. For instance, with phantom, people who've lost a hand, if they feel an itch on the phantom hand, they can often scratch that itch by finding a corresponding part on their face, which is so close on their body map to that where that hand part was, that they can actually scratch an itch on their hand by scratching that part of their face. And one of the reasons perhaps that this works is that given they don't have that hand anymore, that part of their brain is sort of useless dead space now, and their neuroplasticity, this is a term that describes the brain's adapting to new circumstances. So if a certain part of the brain is no longer being used for something, then neighbouring parts of the brain might just think, oh, okay, well, we'll have some of that space quite. So maybe what's happening is that the face sensing parts have expanded into the hand area, and that's why you can now scratch an itch on a non-existent hand by scratching your face. It might also explain why some people really love a foot massage. Anyway, why was I even saying that? So there's a certain amount of brain processing with sight I was talking about. So we see what we expect, and we also feel what we expect. So if you expect to feel a huge amount of pain, chances are you will. And if you expect not to feel any pain, chances are you won't. Now, if pain mapped exactly to damage, then you'd still feel pain when you were asleep, but you don't. The committee says, actually, we'll take a rest now. Putting him in pain is not going to help with sleeping. It's better he gets a good night rest. So we'll all vote. Everyone vote. Yeah, great. We'll turn it off. But maybe during the night, some creature bites you on the foot. In which case, yeah, okay, they'll have an extraordinary committee meeting, and all right, yeah, fair enough. Under these circumstances, we think, yeah, wake him up. But generally, you don't feel any pain when you're asleep. So I'm going to keep coming back to this idea of the committee in the head, because I do think it's a very useful one. Now, there was a chap called Grantley Dick Reed. He was a doctor, a British doctor. He became an obstetrician. He qualified in 1914. So he'd grown up in that sort of Victorian stroke Edwardian world with its own moralities and the like. He became an obstetrician, worked in a clinic, and he saw an awful lot of fairly well-to-do middle-class, well supported. Their families were there. They'd paid extra money to have painkillers and so forth. These are the women who perhaps had antenatal classes and so forth. It was all planned. It was all, and they knew what they were doing, and they were having a baby, and they were in tremendous pain. He saw the pain they went through. Oh my goodness! And then one day he was called to a little house in Whitechapel where a poor young girl was giving birth, and he witnessed something which struck him as really quite extraordinary. It was so easy, so natural, and actually rather beautiful, if anything. And he said to her afterwards, but the pain, you coped magnificently with the pain. How on earth did you cope so well with the pain? We didn't give you anything for it. And she said, what pain, doctor? Oh, is it meant to hurt? Why would it hurt? She had 3 points. By saying what pain, doctor, she told him that she hadn't actually experienced an amount of pain that she thought worth remarking upon. And is it supposed to hurt? Told him no one had told her that it was going to hurt. So she hadn't been expecting it to hurt. So she hadn't been thinking to herself, oh, is it hurt? Is it hurting? Am I sure I should be monitoring pain? No, she was busy giving birth. She had other stuff on her mind. So she didn't think about whether it was hurting or not. And as for the third question, why would it hurt? Well, it should hurt because that's a point. Why should it hurt? I mean, why should nature make childbirth the most important thing you could possibly do in evolutionary terms? Why would it make that hurt? If pain is a punishment, why would you be punished for doing the most important thing you could possibly do? Now, you can understand how if things were going wrong, if the baby was the wrong way round, it was in great distress, it was coming out backwards, umbilical cord around its throat or something. Yes, if things were going wrong, then maybe pain would have a role to play. But if everything's going fine, surely nature should just be saying, you go, girl, you're doing great. Yeah, one more push and you've got a daughter. But most people today experience tremendous pain. Well, there was a Scottish lady called Jo, and she didn't realise that she was anything unusual until she was 65 when they gave her a hip replacement. And when they saw the state of the hip that they took out, they were saying, "What? How on earth were you not in agony? This is grinding bone on bone with horrible edges. It must have been horrendously painful." "Oh, well, I didn't really mind, doctor," she said. She was very cheery. "Oh, I was just pottering around my kitchen. As long as I can make myself a cup of tea, I'm fine." "What? Really? What?" But so they thought, this woman's worthy of study because there's something odd about this woman. And they studied her, and then in the 1970s, several newspaper articles came out about her because she became a bit of a celebrated case because she really just seemed to be oblivious to pain, and she was so cheery. And they found that there was a gene. No, not, they called it far out, FAAH-out. Out as in don't have this ability. It's been knocked out in her. It's fatty acid something appearing on your screen now. Point is that if she got a chemical that made her happy, "Oh, that's a lovely present. Thank you so kindly, dear." Oh, and she felt good. That chemical would be released into her body, and she would then feel good because that was going around her brain. But her body couldn't break that chemical down, so it lingered, and then something else. Now, "Oh, that was a lovely cup of tea. Oh, I heard a lovely story yesterday, and oh, I do like this cake, and oh, I've got a PhD in astrophysics." I made that up just so I didn't sound too patronising about Scottish old ladies. I don't know that she probably didn't have a degree in astrophysics, but it doesn't matter. The point is that every time something made her feel good, that lingered around. And by the time that they were studying her in her 70s, she was permanently high. And this was an amazing case. As I say, she became a minor celebrity for a bit. And loads of other people around the country reading this went, "Oh, well, actually, I'm pretty special on the pain front myself. I think I should write to these researchers at the University of where is it? Okay. And maybe they'll study me and maybe I'll become famous." And a very large number of people contacted the researchers, and they did notice that there was one particular category of recurring people. They thought, there's so many people reporting this same thing, we should be looking into this. And they got 1,000 women who felt no pain during childbirth, and they studied them. And sure enough, they found that they were genetically distinct. They had a mutation, and they thought, "Oh wow, we found these freaks of nature." Until someone made the rather sensible suggestion of, "Well, don't you think we should test the general population at large to see how common this is?" 1 in 10 women have this. 1 in 10 women have this mutation, which means that they don't feel any significant amount of pain during normal childbirth. So it's actually reasonably common. Grantley Dick Reed, in 1942, he published a book called Childbirth Without... Actually, it's had several titles, but it's still in print. And the current title is Childbirth Without Fear. It was about his studies. So he took an interest in these young girls giving birth unsupported on their own. And they would usually come to his attention when someone would come into the hospital saying, "Oh, you know, my newborn baby, she's got this rash on her arm and she doesn't seem to be feeding well in the mornings," or whatever, there's some problem. And they would say, "Well, we don't seem to have a record of this child. Where did you give birth to?" "Oh, I did it myself." And they say, "Oh, well, I think Dr. Reed should have a word with you." So he would interview them and find out that these were young girls who'd been disowned by their families. "I told you should never have hung around with that good for nothing. I told you he'd abandoned you, and you've got pregnant out of wedlock. You're a disgrace. We don't want anything more to do with you." So these were unsupported young women who were not educated, but they weren't stupid, so they knew they were pregnant. They knew they were going to give birth to a baby, and so they knew that when the time came, they would have to have found somewhere to go and give birth. But they were doing this on their own. They didn't have the money to pay for a hospital before the NHS. And when he interviewed them, in the main, they didn't report feeling any significant amount of pain. They had a really major task to get on with, and they were the only person there, so they had to handle it all themselves. It's a very emotional time in a lot of ways, but you're pretty focused on what you're doing, and they gave birth, and I'm not saying they felt no pain, but they weren't particularly conscious. You know, a fire alarm could be ringing for ages and ages and no one's answering it, and you can just get on with your work, and after a while you don't really notice it, you're not listening to it. Well, similarly, perhaps they did feel some pain, but that wasn't what they were focused on. But if you've been told, if you've been educated, it's going to hurt like hell, and people are all, are you all right? And they're taking you by the hand, is the pain not too bad? And they're offering you gas and air. If they're putting you in mind constantly of the pain above everything else, then yeah, you're going to get really anxious and you're going to focus on the pain, and whatever pain there is will seem an awful lot worse. Now, a lot of women will say, oh, you men know nothing. Childbirth is the worst of all pains. Well, no, the science is in, no, it isn't. I mean, it can hurt a lot, I'm quite sure about that. But it isn't the worst of all pains. There are many other pains that are way worse. I saw a documentary once by this guy who was bitten by a black mamba, and it caused every single one of his pain receptors to fire simultaneously all over his body, and it was written on his face. He wasn't an old man, and yet deep, he was in pain for a very, very, very long time, most of a year, I think, and it was absolutely etched into his face. That was the face of a man who had gone through torment, and yet 5 minutes after giving birth, an awful lot of mothers are just radiant, aren't they? No, there are a lot of pains a lot worse than childbirth, and yet it's quite easy for me to believe that there are a lot of women who genuinely believe that it's the worst pain, because for them that's the worst pain that they ever felt. So it's the worst of all pains. But there are an awful lot of things to make it bad. So, for instance, if I get a pin, and whilst you're listening to this, I just jab it in the back of your neck. So you go, oh, what was that? Someone just jabbed me quite unexpectedly in the back of the... Well, very short-lived pain. By the time you've noticed it, it's over already, and you don't have any particular reason to worry about it, so you carry on listening to me. But if I say, I have a pin here, I'm going to push this pin into the end of your nose, and I've got you somehow immobilized in your chair. You can't move your head, you can't move your hands, your feet. You're stuck to your chair, and I come closer and closer with this pin, and I tell you what I'm going to do, and I show you the pin, and you see it glint in the light, and I bring it very, very close to the end of your nose, like that. And the end of your nose is going to be really tingling in anticipation. Ah, he's going to stick a pin in me, he's going to stick a pin in me, I don't like it. And there's helplessness. Helplessness makes pain worse. Anxiety makes pain worse. Anticipation makes pain worse. And when I push it in slowly, and I leave it there, and I have an evil grin on my face. So you have all the emotional pain of cruelty on top of that, and it's drawn out, and all those things are making it worse. Well, it's a bit like childbirth, isn't it? You know, it's drawn out, massive amount of anticipation, it's heightened emotion, and all the rest of it. And yet, when have you ever known a woman pass out during childbirth from pain? Doesn't happen, does it? And yet a soldier in the middle of a battle, pumped up to the eyeballs on adrenaline, which, by the way, doesn't kill pain exactly, it more distracts you from it. But anyway, it makes you far more able to tolerate pain. And the battle is raging around him. There are explosions and so forth. He's charging forward. This is a big, strong guy. He's already been shot in the leg, and he's hardly even noticed it. But then he takes a bullet to the gonads, and that guy is going down out for the count. It was quick, it was unexpected. But even though he had every advantage for taking that hit, down he goes. So yeah, childbirth, it's bad, but it's not the worst pain. Now, at the Battle of Anzio, the Americans, this is during World War II, suffered a load of casualties, and if you had a minor wound, you would just deal with it yourself, or someone in your section would help it. If you had a slightly more major wound, you might be taken to a field station, a dressing station, whatever. There are these different stages, but if you get back to the field, to the hospital, that meant you had a pretty serious wound, a wound that's probably going to mean you're going to go home. 70% of the wounded in the hospital at Anzio didn't report pain. Now these are men who've got an entry wound there and a huge, great exit wound stuffed with a load of bandages and so forth. But they're in the hospital, which means safety and going home. And there are loads of other people who are worse, and the fighting's over for them, and they didn't report pain. The doctors who did the study showing that the 70% of these men in that field hospital didn't report pain, when they went back to Boston, they noticed that 70% of the patients in the hospital in Boston, some of which had very minor ailments, reported pain. So the circumstance and the type of person doing the reporting makes a huge difference. And this is one of the reasons that studying pain is so difficult and so controversial. This man over here says, "Oh, doctor, please, can you give me something for the pain?" And this is a 63-year-old Yorkshire farmer who hasn't been to the doctor in 18 years. And he says to you, "Hey, doctor, could you take a look at my knee? I'm not so sure about it." Right. This person is probably fine, but this guy, I'm not even going to examine him. I'm just ringing for an ambulance now. By the way, in Britain, they have to give training to foreign doctors coming to Britain, because quite often when someone says, "Doctor, I don't think my knee's feeling too clever," they have to be taught British understatement. No, seriously, you can be if a 63-year-old Yorkshire farmer who's just, how many times has a farmer in the last 18 years during which he hasn't been to the doctor at all? How many times has he hurt himself doing farm work? Loads of times, but he hasn't bothered the doctor with just something minor like a lost toe or something. But no, when he comes in with this knee's not feeling too clever, take heed. Okay, so how much pain you feel is largely to do with function, and the function is largely to do with the opinion of the committee, which is sometimes wrong. There is something called allodynia, which a lot of people find quite mysterious. So I want you to imagine you've bashed yourself here really quite hard. You were doing some HEMA and you tried to parry someone's mace. That was not a good move, and they hit you whack there, and you got horrible bruises and a great big sweat. I mean, this is not all in your head. You're definitely damaged here. What pain you feel here is like absolutely legitimate. Oh yeah, your body is quite definitely damaged, and it's going to take quite a while for this to heal. Okay, so that's why you're feeling pain there, and you will also get allodynia, which is a strange thing. Right, the first mystery is, allodynia is super sensitivity. So if you just touch, ow, you just touch the skin there, and ow, yeah, that's really, really sensitive. But wait a minute. All right, if I touch myself there, this part of my finger is fine. If I touch myself there, I can even prod it doesn't hurt at all. And why should it? Because this doesn't, a gentle little touch like that doesn't do you any damage whatsoever. So if you just gently touch the skin where a wound's happened, this is unbroken skin, if you just gently touch it, you're not doing any damage at all. And yet, your body reacts, "Oh, wow," as though you are. But you're not. I mean, just a gentle, that's not going to do anything. That's not going to do anything. So why does it hurt so much? Well, it's telling you, stay back, stay back, stay back, which makes some sense. But if that's the case, why do I keep touching it? Why do people go, "Wow, that really hurts"? Yeah, it does. Yeah, it really does. Just, yeah, we do. "Oh, yeah, it really does." Well, stop doing it then. Well, and they keep doing it. And they themselves think, why do I keep doing it? I keep feeling the pain. Pain's meant to be a good teacher, right? That's what you were saying earlier, weren't you, Lloyd, in this very video. So you should learn, don't touch it, you idiot. Well, imagine you've had this wound and life will carry on, and you've got to do your accounts. Here, there you are at your computer, typing away, doing your accounts. You have no allodynia, and after a while, you're not really thinking about this anymore because you're focused on the task. You're thinking about the accounts. You're adding up all these lines of figures, and you get to something, you realise, I need to know the date for that. What was the date? It'll be in my diary, which is in the bottom drawer. Hang on, and you lean on the arm of your chair as you reach down for that drawer, and you lean right, right on the corner, right on the, what an idiot I am. Ow! I mean, it was going to take a couple of weeks to heal. Now it's going to take a couple of weeks and a couple of days now, because you just set it back a couple of days' work. Idiot! Ow! You see, you had no allodynia. But if you'd had allodynia, you would have the tiniest brush, just every time you moved your arm slightly and you just knocked your coffee cup, just the tiniest, you were reminded of it. And as you were adding up those list of figures, you were just sort of absent-mindedly just sort of touching, why do I keep doing that? I don't know. And you keep getting reminded so that when you reach for your diary, you don't lean on it. But why do you keep touching it? Because you're being punished. Well, yeah, you are feeling pain. That's true. But what you're not so conscious of is you're also being rewarded. You get the feeling of pain in your brain, but you also get a reward. You're getting little dopamine and opiate hit for, yeah. Keep doing that. So you touch it. Ow! And you quite want the ooh again, but you remember the ow, but let's go for the ooh and ow! And you keep touching it. Well, it's actually to your advantage. You have evolved that weird behaviour because in the long term, it's to your advantage to keep just reminding yourself, that bit still hurts. Now, there was a chap called Franz Mesmer. You may have heard of him. He operated in France. And from him we get mesmerism, the word. And this was the early days of hypnotherapy. And he would get people who were in tremendous pain and use his hypnotherapy, which wasn't called hypnotherapy at that time. It had other names. He sometimes called it animal magnetism. I'm using animal magnetism. And he would wave his arms over the patient in front of him, get to sit in front of him, and he would use animal magnetism. And he would mesmerize them with his animal magnetism, you see. And they'd stop feeling pain, and he would make all sorts of claims that what he could achieve with animal magnetism. And the King of France, who was Louis the 16th at the time, he said, I do not trust this mesmer man. I want my top scientists to investigate him. And so they did. And they did some reasonably good, rigorous science, and were able to show that nothing to do with magnetism. He wasn't using magnetism at all. This whole what he claimed to be doing and what he claimed to be able to do, he was a fraud. He was a charlatan. He claimed to be able to treat all these different conditions and loads of them he could do nothing for at all, and he wasn't doing it with magnetism. No. It was just some sort of hypnotism-y type thing, which perhaps they didn't have a word for, but whatever. They debunked him. But unfortunately, they sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater because, it's true that what he claimed that he was doing, he wasn't doing, and what he claimed to be able to do was also wildly exaggerated. But there were people who felt less pain as a result of having been mesmerised, and they sort of, scrub around that. But no, that was an actual result. Now, there are more modern studies that have been done that really back this up, and more work has been done on placebos. I shall please. There was one Harvard professor whose name is appearing on the screen now, who went out rather unusually to study Chinese medicine for 4 years, and he came back and he set up a clinic in the USA, and he was really quite successful, and so successful that a lot of Western serious medical thinkers were looking at him thinking, how's he doing this? What's it? And he had himself no illusions. He was pretty sure that it's just placebo effect, but it's just really good placebos. And placebos tend to work particularly well on people who've been let down by modern medicine. They've got some complaint. Modern medicine has not dealt with it. Those people tend to be particularly receptive to a really good placebo. Personally, I'm allergic to placebos, so they don't really work terribly well on me. But anyway, they did tests for irritable bowel syndrome. And here's the weird thing. They could have a nice chat with a nice doctor who'd be ever so sympathetic. And that's it, though. They didn't get any treatment. Or they could be given a placebo. And when I say placebo, I mean an open, honest placebo. They would be given a placebo. They would be told, this is a placebo. This is how a placebo works. They weren't lied to. There was no pretense here. And the placebo did better than the nice talk with a nice doctor. Now, part of the placebo effect comes from being listened to, but reassured, and talking to an expert who listens to your case and is sympathetic and so forth. So if you get a placebo and a nice talk with a nice doctor, that works better again. But it worked better. It worked really well. They had something like a 50% success rate in treating irritable bowel syndrome with open placebos. it's amazing how well placebos can work. And people are getting better and better and better at designing placebos. So we know, for instance, if you give someone an injection, that's a more powerful placebo than a pill. And who you are makes a difference. So men, for instance, like pills that are called extra strong. And if it's a painkiller, red is really good. Whereas for women, they might want a more natural colour, like a pastel green might work better for them. So you have to tailor it to some degree to the person. But sorry, bit of a sidetrack. There was a study done in Germany. For ages and ages, no one could test acupuncture against placebos, which is the standard way of testing things in modern medicine. Because how do you do a placebo of sticking loads of pins in someone? They can either see that you've stuck a load of pins in them or not. And just saying, we're sticking loads of pins in you now, just don't look, doesn't work terribly well. With a pill, it's easy. You just give someone a pill that just doesn't have any active ingredients in it. And this was a major engineering problem because the pins for acupuncture are really thin and quite long. So how do you do a fake one of those? But eventually, some engineers in Germany were able to create tubes that were really, really thin, and within those some really, really thin but really, really strong wire that wouldn't bend and kink, so that it could retract into the outer thing, a bit like one of those stage daggers, so you've got the blade sticking out, and you put it on the person you're meant to be stabbing, and what they do is they actually push the blade against the spring into the handle, and then it's on a little spring, so when you withdraw it, it comes back out again, and it looks like you've stabbed someone. Well, they had to do that, but with an acupuncture needle, but it's so thin, it was really very, very difficult. But eventually they managed it and found that the placebo acupuncture worked really well. Although, weirder still, people who got both the placebo and real, if you like, actual stabby acupuncture, their results were slightly better again. But is that because it was a more convincing placebo? Some of those people saw the occasional drop of blood, or it felt a little bit more painful or something. They were just a little bit more convinced that this was real acupuncture. Maybe that's why the ones who got some real acupuncture as well got a slightly better result. It's so difficult to measure these things accurately, but people are getting really good with placebos. So with the right authoritative doctor, the right setting, the right music, the right atmosphere, the right smells, the right everything, you can tailor a placebo for someone and get something really effective, which is a big problem now for modern medicine, because it's always been the case that you test a medicine that you want to prove has an actual effect by comparing it with a placebo, and only if it does better than the placebo can you say it's real medicine. But what if you've invented a medicine that does actually work 20% of the time? It really does. Its active ingredient will work on 20% of the people who've got this condition. But if 30% of those people respond to a placebo, you haven't outcompeted the placebo, so it's as though you've not created any actual medicine, and perhaps that won't be passed because it didn't outcompete the placebo. But placebos are getting so good now that it's actually very difficult to develop a medicine that's better than the placebo. Getting a 33%, which is somewhere around the typical success rate for a placebo, getting a medicine that works 33% of the time, that's pretty difficult. That's a decent medicine if it'll work that often. Anyway, hypnotherapy is unusual for what you might call complementary medicine, in that in 1969, NICE, that's the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, it's the body in Britain which regulates what can call itself medicine, accepted that hypnotherapy was a genuinely useful, viable and functional piece of medicine. So that's quite unusual. And homeopathy isn't there yet. Okay, so pain's an illusion, and one of the reasons that we know it's an illusion is that the committee can be fooled by placebos. And I think one way of looking at a placebo, what is a placebo? How about a placebo is like an outside consultant who comes breezing, it's hired, he's hired at great expense, he turns up in his limo, he steps out of it and he's got a beautiful expensive suit and glasses that make him look dead clever, and he's got a 5-speed briefcase and a file of facts, and he sits down and in a very calm and authoritative voice says, "Hello, members of the committee, I am an outside consultant and I am an expert in this particular instance. Now, I do understand that you've been running this body for the last, 36 years, and you've been doing a fine job of it, I'm sure. In general, this body is in very good health. However, with this particular thing, I am a world expert, and it's quite unreasonable for any of you to think that you could possibly know as much as I do about this thing. And if you get this person to stand on one leg and eat oranges and say the word spinach twice a day, then it will cure them. So you come up with this, whatever it is, the placebo that's specific to this. And he gets an awful lot of people round the table go, oh wow, well he's an expert, he really knows about this thing. So the cure sounds a bit strange, but fair enough. I mean, I defer to his greater expertise. I mean, he's got an amazingly expensive suit. And, you know, I'm not a specialist in this particular instance, and everything we've tried so far hasn't really worked. And he was a very expensive consultant. So frankly, you know, now we've paid all this money, it would be just bizarre of us to just ignore the advice of an acknowledged expert. So fair enough, I changed my vote from pain to no pain. And so this outside expert persuades the committee to, oh, well, all right, we'll try switching it off and see if everything's all right. And if everything is all right, then you've trained your body a bit. If you then find, oh, that you can actually move your lower back. Oh, okay, that's fine. And you've trained yourself that you're fine, which is really important, because that is the way to get out of long-term pain. Training yourself somehow to believe that you're fine. And everything about the way our bodies work is evolved for the Pleistocene, when we were Stone Age hunters. So here comes my next big category. The modern world is unfortunately different. I listened to a wonderful program on radio 4 years ago about the problem of recruiting Gurkhas in Nepal for the British Army. Now, getting people to turn up to volunteer, that's not the problem. I mean, even today, 50,000 Nepalese volunteer every year for just 200 places. No, the problem was, how do we whittle it down to 200 without killing some? It's 200 today, it used to be much more. But how can we whittle it down to the small number we're going to take out of all these incredibly keen applicants? Because being a Gurkha was so high status. You could always tell the home of a Gurkha in one of the little villages. It would be the biggest house in the village and the only one with running water and electricity or whatever. So joining the British Army proved, just by the fact that you got in the first place, that they accepted you. You must have passed all the tests. You must be just ace. So it was super high status and they were super competitive. But what can we test them on? Well, we can test them on knowledge of English, and no, they don't speak. None of them speaks English, so we can't do anything that involves giving them orders or filling in forms. A lot of them are illiterate. Oh, okay. Anything to do with technology? Well, they can work this. No, anything. They can't work radios or do the technology. They're not. No, we can't really test them on that. Okay, well, let's just go for determination and physical fitness then. How about that? Okay, so these guys have to show us that they're tough and they really want to be in the army. Okay, so, right, you lot, run up that mountain and then back. And they all do it. Well, you haven't weeded out any of them. Oh, okay, right, well, what about that mountain? That one's really big. And they all do it and come back, but a couple of them have had minor falls, and one of them, he had a really, really close scrape. He could have fallen a very long way. That was a bit dangerous, but no one's died. Okay, they're all back down. Oh, that still hasn't separated any of them out. All right, so you have to make a basket from what you can see in this area and fill it full of rocks and then carry them up. And these guys would do it. They would then just put this crude basket on their back filled with really heavy rocks, and they would run up and down that mountain, even if you gave them a short time to do it, and they would rub the skin off their backs. They were so determined. They would go through so much pain to join the British Army that the recruiters think, how are we going to get it down to 200 without killing someone? That was then. More recent tests. Oh, they did a load of tests on Sherpas as well to have a look, and they found Sherpas, the Nepalese mountain guides for climbers, and they found that these guys had really high pain tolerances. But today, recruits from modern Nepal who have had access to Western medicines for their whole lives now, and a lot of them are from centrally heated homes, they have electricity, and some of them are on the internet and so forth. They're becoming modern. They're wearing modern, soft, bouncy, rubbery trainers and so forth. They're not much tougher than the British equivalent recruits. It seems there's been a steep drop off in the toughness of Gurkhas. Modernity, it seems, makes us soft. About 500 million people around the world, that's half an American billion, suffer from diabetes. And this is partly the result of sugary diets, possibly, or low exercise and so forth. It's complicated. This is not a video about diabetes. But anyway, the point is there are an awful lot of these people. And about half of them get numbness in extremities, particularly feet. And today, yes, okay, there are people who get their feet blown off by landmines or something as sudden trauma. But in terms of elective amputations, where a doctor has said, right, the best thing for us to do, I'm afraid, is amputate. The number one cause is diabetes. And it's just like leprosy. You lose sensation in your foot, you stub your toe one day, you carry on walking, you didn't notice there's anything wrong. It's a week before you go to the doctor, by which point the toe's infective and they have to take that toe off. And then more injuries accumulate on your feet over time, and eventually you lose your foot to indirectly diabetes. It's the numbness, just like leprosy. It's the numbness is actually the more proximate cause. So diabetes is a modern ailment that is enormously more common thanks to the modern world, and it's giving an awful lot of people an awful lot of pain. And for a lot of people, the placebo effect, like the NHS, for instance, the National Health Service in Britain, a lot of the placebo effects we've lost. You don't have a relationship with your family doctor. You don't see the same doctor over and over again. You wait in a very impersonal waiting room. You only have a 10-minute consultation, and then what next? And so a lot of the placebo effect of medicine, of doctoring of old, has gone. There are people who say that the main thing that doctors did before antibiotics came in, so go back a century or two, the main thing doctors were really doing was just reassuring people, just holding their hand for a bit and being nice, and maybe giving them a little sip of something that sounds a bit placebo effect. That was the main thing they were doing an awful lot of the time. And modern people can get caught in horrible spirals. So, for instance, you're in pain, so you don't feel like going out. You don't go out, so you don't meet your friends. After a while, they pick someone else for the darts team, and then your social network gets a little bit smaller, and then people stop inviting you to parties because I haven't seen him for years. Is he still around? And eventually, you become lonely. And loneliness is actually worse for your health than smoking. And that's saying a lot, because smoking is really bad for you, but loneliness is really bad for you. So loneliness leads to more loneliness and you spiral in. Or it could be that because your back's hurting or your foot's hurting, you stop doing that sport, and so you get more unfit, which then increases the pain, and then you start getting anxious about that, and the anxiety increases the pain, and you get into a spiral that way. Or maybe you go to the doctor and you say, I've got this pain, I think you should deal with it. And the doctor doesn't really believe you and doesn't really do much, doesn't take your pain seriously, and you feel really quite aggrieved and angry that he didn't take your pain seriously. And then pain leads to anger, and anger leads to anxiety, anxiety leads to stress, which leads to more pain, which then increases your anxiety, and you're in another spiral. And interestingly, people who think that the world is a fair and just place and that people get what they deserve, when they have an injustice against them, or one perceived, if they feel that their pain has been unjustly dismissed, they feel more pain. And just while I think of it, pessimists, if a pessimist is relieved of pain, the relief they feel is more. So there's and some advantage to being a pessimist. But we live today in a world of strangers, which is not good for our well-being. There are a type of chemicals called glucocorticoids, and they block empathy. When we are surrounded by strangers, these glucocorticoids take effect, and we don't feel much empathy for our fellow man around us. Now, if you live in a world full of strangers, it's actually shutting down your empathy. If you live in a world full of people that you are familiar with, you can then relax and then joke with them. And this has a rebounding, like a spiraling up effect of increasing your social well-being and lowering, ultimately, the amount of pain you're likely to feel. But today we live in cities surrounded by strangers, and these glucocorticoids are we're getting zapped by them really quite often. Oh, on your guard, strangers. It's been found that ethnic minorities feel more pain and feel worse pain than the native population of a country. But if you look at the countries that those ethnic minorities have come from, those people don't have those differences. It's not that they're of some genetic stock or of a certain nationality or a certain culture. It's the fact that they are ethnic minorities. It's the fact that they are living in a world surrounded by strangers that makes them more anxious and more prone to feeling a lot of pain. But actually, we are sort of becoming ethnic minorities in our own lands, in that more and more of us are more detached from the world. How many of us live in a community? Do you live in a community? I don't live in a community. I know a few of my neighbours in this street. In the last street, I didn't get to know any of my neighbours. I didn't live in a community. In 2016, there was a study done in American hospitals that showed that black Americans, that is to say, Americans of sub-Saharan African descent, they would be on average they were half as likely to be given painkillers when they came into hospital, and if they were given lower dosages. And it didn't really matter who was doing who was running the hospital, who the staff were, or even what attitude those staff had to pain as experienced by people of different races. And it was in a lot of textbooks that black people felt less pain or had a different attitude to pain, were more accepting of pain than people of other races. And there was a British nurse training textbook that was taken off the market just in 2016, I think it was, quite recently, which had all sorts of statements about how these people and those people felt pain differently. But the thing is that those statements were probably not completely wrong, but didn't really sit happily in a modern textbook when you're trying to train nurses. You could put quite dangerous ideas into a nurse's head. So perhaps it's better not to think of that, although it is annoyingly true that different people will have different attitudes to pain, as you do just from someone else in your own family. Oh, my brother was always such a fusspot, he was always crying wolf, or whatever you might think of your brother. That's two people of the same race from the same family who have different attitudes. So there are differences between groups, but, interesting one, redheads, as in people with ginger hair. It is now medically accepted you have to give them on average about 1.5 times as much pain relieving drugs as non-redheads. And if you are a redhead, I might point out that it perhaps wouldn't surprise you that you are likely to be, of course you're an individual redhead, and it could be that none of this applies to you, but on average as a total group, you are likely to be more sensitive to thermal pain, probably no surprise there, but on the flip side, you're less sensitive on average to electrocution pain. So, swings and roundabouts, eh? Anyway, it's also been studied that women get less pain relief. Even in a very modern study in super feminist Sweden found that women on average ended up in hospital after a heart attack an hour after a man would have, and even then there was a 20-minute difference in how long it took for them to get treatment. Women are often not believed and have their pain dismissed. There's a condition known as endometriosis. Endometriosis is something that women get which is not that rare, actually. It's when uterus cells start growing where they shouldn't, not in the right places, or all sorts of awkward places around the body, and it can be very painful. So a woman will go to a doctor and say, "Oh, I've got this, I don't know, it's like a weird pain here, doctor." And the doctor, "I've got 10 minutes. You're fine. You're always coming in with pains. Oh, here's some painkiller. Go away. Next." And they come back and they come back again and again. And in Britain, it takes an average of 8 years to get a diagnosis. In the United States, 10 years on average for a woman to be diagnosed with endometriosis, despite the fact that it's not that rare. So, yeah, I suppose I'm coming back to it's a problem. Now, if you see pain as the enemy, and this particularly in American culture it is, the painkiller. We call these drugs. It's a painkiller, not a pain easer or pain alleviator or any one of 100 other names you could come up with. It's a painkiller. Pain is the enemy. And in a lot of modern societies, and in the USA it seems to be particularly the case, people seem to feel that they have the right to feel no pain. They should, surely, there should be a thing. Give me the thing and I will feel no pain. And then, because there's whatever it is, there's a pill for it, give me it. And I will pay money. I'm insured for this sort of thing. And the death rate in the USA has, for the first time, the average life expectancy in the US has dropped measurably in recent years. And all of the increase is, if you like, diseases of despair, alcoholism, drug overdoses, and the like. You are more likely to die of an accidental overdose of prescribed painkillers than in a motor accident in the USA. It's a serious problem. And you could say that those alcoholics are sort of part of the same group because a lot of them are self-medicating for pain of some sort. You may say, oh, it's just the pain of heartache, it's not real pain. No, that is, as I mentioned earlier, that's real pain. So as we get more sedentary, more isolated, softer, and we have higher expectations of no pain, and we are risk averse, very risk averse. And if you go through life thinking that everything should be fine, and you see every bit of pain as an unjust setback, you can get really a bad attitude to pain. And so what we have to do is get people to train their minds to not mind pain so much. And there have been quite major successes in this field. So for instance, there are use of virtual reality. So you can use virtual reality for someone, for instance, who had very bad damage to a limb, or maybe the limb's been removed entirely. Put virtual goggles on them, and they can look at their own limb and see an apparently healthy version of the limb, which they can then move. And you might know about the mirror trick, where you get someone who's lost a limb to apparently move that limb, but what they're actually doing is moving the good limb, but they're seeing it in a mirror image. Well, with virtual reality, you can do that, but more. A lot of success with US military veterans using VR. Another thing is something called eye movement desensitization reprogramming, or EMDR. And it's a distraction technique, really. So imagine you've got PTSD, something really horrendous has happened to you, and there's a story you've got. Oh, I was in the back of this anti-personnel carrier with my friends, we were all joking. And you can, as you start telling the story, to the therapist who's getting you to relive it, you start smelling it and seeing those people in your head, and you're there again. And then when the RPG comes through and your friend gets injured and you all pile out the back, and then your officer took a few steps and got his foot blown off by a landmine, and you realise, oh my goodness, I'm now in charge and I have no idea what I'm doing. And then something worse happens after that. And as you're telling the story, your heart rate's going up, you're getting more anxiety, and you start feeling the pain. You start feeling pain from the reliving of the experience. This is the post-traumatic stress disorder. You can distract people. You can get someone, okay, tell me the story again, but this time you give them a task. And one of them is you're just following a ball moving on a screen. And then maybe they do something which makes it more difficult. So you have to follow the black ball. Okay, well, but there's a green one. Oh, no, ignore that. It's the black one. Okay. Oh, it's gone behind a yellow square. Where is it now? Oh, there it is. Okay, right, got it again. And so you're having to concentrate. To do this task, you have eye movement, which some people associate, it's a bit of an NLP thing, neuro-linguistic programming. People believe that moving eye within the socket has an effect on accessing certain parts of the brain. It's a little bit dodgy. It might not be entirely true. But anyway, you're giving this eye movement task, and then you tell the person, all right, so start telling me the story. Oh, well, I was in the back of the APC, and they're thinking about following the dot, and they're just telling the story. And they can get through the story without triggering the PTSD. And once they've done that once, you know you can do it. Oh, I can tell this story without triggering myself. It might take many attempts before you can do it, and you might have to do it many, many times before it gives you a lot of help. But they're having success with this sort of therapy. And again, this all comes together with you're teaching your body that you're all right. When they've studied lower back pain, which is extremely common, and 90% of lower back pain that gets investigated when they do scans of people's backs and what have you, there's no identifiable cause. And if you scan the backs of people who have no lower back. If you scan the backs of very elderly people who are pain-free, their backs are sometimes wrecked. They're with all the things that people explain back pain with. Oh, well, I can see, yes, you've got this, that, and the other wrong with you. That explains your back pain. But you look at people with no back pain, and their backs are every bit as bad. And you can look at pain-free young people, and something like 42% of them have got things that are used to explain back pain in people who complain about back pain, people like me. And they've done studies in areas where loads of people do loads of work that's extremely strenuous on the back, and the incidence of back pain in those areas is lower, not higher. It's people sitting in chairs all day who seem to complain mostly about lower back pain. And I spend a lot of time editing videos. So we have to train ourselves that things are fine. And that seems to be the way forward. And the power of placebo is extraordinary. They did studies in Houston where they did knee surgeries on people and found that doing no knee surgery was often better than doing knee surgery. So these somewhat maverick surgeons, they did fake surgery. So they would bring the patient in, scrub up, you go into the operating theatre, analgesics, you put them under and open up, and then do a crossword. Anyone know any jokes for a bit, and then sew the wound back up again, and then, okay, Mr. Higginsbottom, you're back in the room now. Okay, we've done the surgery on your knee. They haven't done anything. They just made it look as though they've done some surgery. And those people did better, on average, a little, than people who'd actually had real surgery. So what good was the surgery doing? There were people who'd had their knees completely replaced with steel knees who were feeling pain in the steel knees. Yeah, we have to train ourselves that we're all right. Pain is our friend. It's our protector. It keeps us safe. And if you get a healthy attitude to pain, this will help. Pain is an illusion. It's an illusion that cannot be wished away. And I think that it's probably a good analogy that there is a committee in your mind deciding on how much pain is appropriate for you to feel. And if they say, memory archives, we've just landed on the point of our shoulder. What have you got to say? Oh, don't worry, we're playing rugby. I've done this 1,000 times and it's fine.